Hello and welcome along to the Matchbook Weekend Football Podcast, except it's the Midweek Football Podcast this week. It's Monday morning. It's your host, Daniel Hussey. I'm delighted to welcome Mark O'Hare and Miguel Delaney. They're with me next week. I'll get into takeaways from an eventful weekend in just a few minutes, and we'll be covering the usual four marquee midweek fixtures, plus in any other Premier League bet section, and then on to our best bets as well. But before we do that, I do want to quickly draw your attention to this week. You might hear a lot about it, but this week is Safer Gambling Week across the industry, and at Matchbook we particularly want to get that across to you, that there's a lot of tools available. So if you're watching on YouTube or you're listening on the podcast, the tools are basically safergamblinguk.org, and there's a national gambling helpline there as well. So the idea of these podcasts are they're fun, they're meant to enhance the viewing experience as well, but obviously gambling should never take over that experience as well. So all details we'll be talking about across the week throughout all our podcasts on NFL, horse racing and football. But we do want to get that across. Safer Gambling Week and responsible gambling. The details again, safergamblinguk.org, and there's a gambling helpline there as well. So we'll move on to weekend takeaways. And yeah, I want to get into the weekend takeaways here, Mark, and Pep Roulette. And it was I don't know if you got much of the discussion between Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher, but it was fascinating at what Pep Guardiola actually did, really, to start with. But your take on Pep Roulette and how City set up at Anfield there yesterday and the game itself.
Yeah, I didn't see or hear it. Actually, I had my eyes elsewhere because there was so much quality football taking place across the continent that I was literally just watching the football and moving on to the next game, really. So hopefully, I'm not sort of too out of touch with what the experts said. But look, Guardiola has legitimate claims to be one of the best coaches of all time, let alone in the world right now. But he's had these moments where he's probably overthought things, particularly in key matches. And because of his reputation, because of the squad and the players available to him and the standards he sets, I think he deserves criticism when things do go wrong. And I think at Anfield on Sunday, you can point the finger in his direction. Firstly, obviously, the histrionics on the sidelines were unnecessary, and Klopp as well, just as guilty as Pep there. So there's no sort of whataboutery. They're both culpable for their own sort of actions. But I thought his comments post-match were sour grapes, really. The reality was, I think Liverpool, in terms of the 90 minutes, had created the most clear-cut opportunities, whether it's through design or mistakes from a City perspective. Liverpool had the better opportunities to win the game. City had plenty of the ball, but didn't create too many goal-scoring opportunities like we've probably become accustomed to. And I guess it comes down to a number of things, whether it was the atmosphere, the environment of Anfield, which we know has been an issue for City in the past, but also the balance of the team and the team he selected. When I saw the Liverpool team sheet first, we expected Konate to be ruled out anyhow. Gomez switched to centre-half and Milner at right-back, and a very attack-minded Liverpool team as well. I thought if City are on it, they could easily blow Liverpool away here. But what we saw was basically a three-man defence with Cancelo moving into a midfield four or a front three, but kind of pushed De Bruyne on to the right wing. And look, the right-hand side worked pretty well, functioned pretty well. But the left-hand side, which is where they really should have been sort of foraging for most of the game because they're up against Milner, wasn't utilised anywhere near enough. And when Foden did get the ball, he wasn't given sufficient support to really sort of show what he's capable of. And I just expected City to throw much more traffic down the left than they did down the right. And I thought at times they looked a little one-dimensional. Liverpool sat a little bit deeper than they normally would and created a lot of traffic down the centre of the pitch. And City didn't really have any answers for it, really. And I just didn't think they were good enough to win the match. And sure, you can point to sort of refereeing decisions and say that something went against them, but I'd prefer to just extrapolate any sort of refereeing decisions out of the equation because it does feel a bit like sour grapes from Pep. And I didn't think City were good enough. And really looking at the team sheet Liverpool fielded an hour before the game, I thought this game was all set up for City to put on a decent show, but wasn't to be.
Yeah, if you're on the Jamie Carragher side of things, I think, Mark, based on the quick clip I watched regarding Carragher and Neville and their tactical insight there regarding the City's backline. Quickly, Miguel, before we get into your weekend takeaway, your thoughts on Pep Roulette, just because at the start of the podcast you said what I thought was something outrageous, that Pep in a Champions League semi-final against Bayern Munich maybe might drop Haaland, and I was like, I don't know. And then I hear you say it again and again, and then you see Sunday, which was only a small snippet, but I guess you never know with Pep and Pep Roulette, do you?
Funnily, just as we came on air there, I got sent a message on my phone. Apologies to whoever's done the tweet because I didn't see you put some joke. I'm not sure it's joking more. That a game like this is the seed for suddenly to get into Guardiola's head about Haaland and these sort of games, and then suddenly he's playing 10 midfielders in Champions League semi-final. So I mean, like, it's not. I mean, given this is a podcast about odds and all these sort of things, let's it's not completely rule it out.
Backable. And regarding, so look, on the title and currently a matchbook, we have Arsenal at 8.0. I don't know whether people are surprised by those odds, if they're too big, too small. I think at the start of the season, Arsenal were general 50.0 shot across the board. They might have been late money to get them started at 40.0. But for you, Miguel, is there a title race this season?
Look, I mean, when you break everything down, I think the expectation would still be for City to win it quite comfortably. But I mean, like I thought yesterday was quite a significant day, not just for City's defeat, but also because I mean, around the exact same time that match started at Anfield, there was the game on at Leeds. Leeds could have had a penalty. It went to VAR, and I mean, at that moment, that could have been the day. That meant that yesterday could have been the day then where Arsenal slipped, City won, suddenly City are ahead, and no one catches them up again, which was highly possible, I'd say. Instead, Arsenal are now 4 points clear. They weren't. Their performance wasn't great yesterday, but that's going to happen from time to time. And I think as important, I mean, people can point to the kind of concerns of the performance, but the other side of that is when you're on a kind of a learning curve like Arsenal are, you have to learn to get through these games. Yes, they were fortunate, but every top team in history has had fortune in these situations. It's about maximizing it. So I think at the very least that was significant. It propels the possibility of a title race that bit further. And I think crucially, that bit closer to the World Cup, because this is the great unknown in this. The World Cup and the amount of players City have in it, even maybe the length of break that Haaland has off, it could just change things. This is a massive unknown. And I think, obviously, the longer that Arsenal can stay in it, or if they can stay in it to the World Cup, just their chances of actually putting up a proper title chase and something different happening are shortened.
Yeah, and Mark, very briefly on you and the title race, and maybe more given the World Cup and that unknown factor we have at the moment, because you just don't know how teams get based on injuries and form in that World Cup, how they'll come out of it come January.
Yeah, for sure. I think the Arsenal one is very interesting. 4 points clear. So you can see them now, 7-1, 8.0 to win the title. I just had a very quick look at what the handicaps were at the beginning of the season, and Arsenal were given a 20-point head start over Man City, which kind of goes to show the expectations pre-season to where they are now. So still there's a big difference between the two teams, even if Arsenal have got a 4-point start on City right now. I looked at the expected points rankings, which is pretty much bang in line with what the expected points outcomes based on the odds. Basically, you can generate an expected scoreline and expected points return just by looking at pre-match odds, really. And Arsenal would have 19 based on the odds. And in terms of their actual XG performances, it's around about 19.5. So they're performing bang in line with market expectations. But if you look at the actual points, they've picked up a lot more. So they are slightly overperforming in that regard. You could say probably significantly so. But yeah, in terms of the title race, I was asked last week about Liverpool already being out of the title race before the Man City game, and it just felt very premature because they have that game in hand over City. Obviously had the game against City, which they could easily claw 3 points back on them as well, which they have done. And as for all the reasons Miguel talked about it, it's a year and season we're not accustomed to. We don't know how these kind of variables will impact the campaign. Liverpool have had a ton of injuries themselves. A few players were making their way back. A few players have now picked up more injuries. Man City have been quite fortunate in that regard. I know they've had a couple defensively with Stones and Walker, but in terms of the key men going forward, they've been largely untouched. And look, Haaland has had a history in the last couple of seasons of picking up some relatively long-term injuries. You know, he's been out for a couple of months at times for Dortmund, and we just don't know. He could easily come back and pick up something on the first game back in January, and suddenly he's out of action for 3 months, and we're looking at a very different Man City team from what we've seen so far. So, yeah, never rule anything out in football. I think Liverpool were 14 points shy of City at the turn of the year last season and brought that back into a thrilling title race. So, never rule out anything.
Yeah, incidentally, Haaland has praised the City physios, and I think he's brought them on international duty with Norway. So it'll be interesting how that plays out throughout the season. All right, good stuff, lads. We're going to take in 4 midweek games this week: Manchester United versus Spurs, Liverpool versus West Ham, Leeds at home to Leicester, and Fulham versus Villa. A couple of Thursday games there as well. So let's get straight into it, guys. If you are watching on this YouTube, incidentally, do hit that thumbs up and leave a comment on who you fancy for the week. So the big one, Wednesday night game here, and a big one at Old Trafford. It's Manchester United at home to Tottenham. Let's take a look at the betting as we have it at matchbook.com. Manchester United are 6-4 shot at 2.5, Spurs 2-1 at 3.0, and the draw is available at 3.65. Both teams to score, another low one with yes at 1.62, no 2.48. The handicap, Spurs are getting a quarter of a goal head start at 1.84, and the total we have is 2 3/4, and that's slightly shaded towards the over. So we'll go to you on this one, Mark, and take it away. Massive game for United. They were okay at times against Newcastle. A couple of penalties and free kick. Was it taken? Was it not? It seemed, watching it in the background, that a draw was probably a fair result. How are you with Manchester United going into this game?
Yeah, I'm not too sure on United. They're one of the teams that I'm still struggling to sort of work out properly, and I wonder whether the way in which Tottenham approach this game might actually negate United's key strengths, or the way in which United have played, particularly in their wins against Arsenal and Liverpool, which has been quite largely on the counter-attack and in transitions. I think Christian Eriksen's absence on Sunday against Newcastle was key. He's probably been the first name on the team sheet so far this season, and we saw how imperative he was, because I did think, from what I saw, they lacked a bit of creativity and a bit of balance without him. Ronaldo, obviously starting up front, does disrupt things a little bit as well. Would expect Rashford to come back into the team after his substitute appearance, just gives them a bit more mobility. But yeah, Newcastle gave United 62% of the ball on Sunday, and United failed to generate more than 0.85 expected goals, just 2 shots on target. So, something similar could be on the cards here if Spurs do decide to kind of concede possession here and try and play in counterattacks and transitions. Only at West Ham in so far this season in the Premier League have Spurs had more of the ball than their hosting team. So, I think that's probably more by design, really, than we probably expect it to. But Spurs, I think this is a fascinating match. Obviously, I think I'd be surprised if we saw anything similar to what we saw in the second half of Anfield in terms of a thriller, the minutes kind of you attack, we'll attack kind of approach. I just think Antonio Conte, big Premier League game away from home, he's seen the script already with what Arsenal and Liverpool have done at Old Trafford. I know you could probably look towards Tottenham's 2-2 draw at Chelsea and the 3-1 reverse at Arsenal, which suggests it should be another high-scoring game. And obviously the attacking Arsenal that Spurs have, you'd expect them to win a gunfight. But I think Richarlison is missing here. Kulusevski's still coming back from injury too. So yeah, and Spurs away from home have largely uninspired so far this season. Just 2 wins in 7 across Premier League and Champions League. They scored 0 or 1 goal in 5 of those matches as well. And their XG tally suggests that they haven't deserved to kind of like bundles more than what they've been getting. And they have looked like more of a grinding team rather than a side that's likely to sort of put teams to the sword. So I just wonder whether they might cancel each other out a little bit. It's just stylistically here. So I was half tempted by under 3 goals, but just a bit too short to support. I looked at Spurs plus a quarter. The market prices do suggest Tottenham are the strongest suit, but I'm not sure anyone would largely disagree with that. But I guess, you've got a good chance of only getting a half stakes winner there because of the draw, really. And I think because I can't really sort of put my full support behind either team at the prices, I've just ended up back in the draw at 3.6 here. United are actually rated as a mid-table side so far, according to underlying numbers. Tottenham's performance levels away from home, as I say, are pretty uninspiring, and they're sort of ranked around mid-table away from home too. So, yeah, I just think both teams could conceivably cancel each other out here, and we could get, I wouldn't call it a stinker, but more of a grinding game than a sort of a electric end-to-end sort of encounter.
Yeah, 3.65 currently. That's a big price. Miguel, you're on similar lines here. Quickly on Tottenham's game on Saturday, it was amazing, and they seemed so stale in their performance. And Richarlison comes off, they move to 3 in midfield, and they absolutely obliterated Everton for the last 40 minutes. Sometimes you need that bit of luck to maybe find a formation as a manager, perhaps. Yeah,
that's been a little bit of a trend of Tottenham's season so far as well. Well, like maybe it's happened in some of the more prominent games, including in the first day of the season, where they were either losing or drawing Southampton at half time. Conte made switches at mid-game, and they ended up blowing them away. And it is one of Conte's great skills, to be fair. His tactical insight mid-game, or kind of for what formation suits the situation. I do think there's other factors playing into Tottenham at the moment. If I was talking to someone during the week who might have said this the other day, but there's a bit of a feeling that he's looking to conserve energy, or can conserve the physical load, I suppose, as the conditioning teams would put it, before the World Cup, because he wants to keep Tottenham fresher for afterward. That we will see the truth of that, but I think it's quite interesting and certainly logical. And as I'd be going with Mark's thought, I think I think 0-0 is pretty decent for this game, I must say. I've gone maybe slightly safer with under 2.5. And this might sound amazing for a team that lost or was involved in a 6-3 only 2 weeks ago. But I think for the most part now, for the moment, United are actually, they're quite a good bet for low-scoring games because bar that match against City, which came after a long break, Ten Hag seems to have restored a bit of bite about them. But they've got issues in front of goal. And it's been suggested to me as well that it's kind of a bit of a confidence thing at the moment as they get to grips and learn a new system, that they look like a team that don't believe they can score at the moment. That happens with sides. And it certainly happens with sides who are going through a kind of a complete or a switch to a new approach. And yeah, I think Tottenham will keep it. So the one danger for me is almost if Tottenham get one goal or they send some vulnerability United, they are capable of picking them off. That's, I think, the one potential variable in this game, because I don't think it's going to be one of those games where United just take Tottenham and really kind of take the game to them and take them apart. That's probably just not going to happen. But yeah, so for all of that, I'm going for a low-scoring game. I would almost go for a 0-0 or a 1-1, but I suppose under 2.5 covers that, and maybe a slender win for either side.
Yeah, 16.5 currently on Matchbook, Miguel. So maybe worth a small. Yeah, I knew I'd get that reaction. Yeah. So if you do want the safer players, Miguel said under 2.5 is probably decent and probably where I'd be leaning 2.18. But we're going to lock in the draw at 3.65. I think that's a good one to cheer on, given it's probably the game of the week. And yeah, definitely worth it. Over 5-2. So 3.65 currently on Matchbook. The second game we have is at Anfield. It's Liverpool at home to West Ham. Let's take a look at the betting as we have it on matchbook.com. Liverpool are 1.45, West Ham 8.0, and the draw available at 5.2. Both teams to score yes is 1.78, no is 2.18. The handicap given West Ham 1.25 goal start at 1.99, and the total we have is 3.0. So Miguel, sticking with you on this one, it gives us a chance to talk a little bit about Liverpool. What a massive game. I was saying off air, if you come with me for a second, if they lost, they're 16 points. That's the narrative, where now if they win the game in hand, they're only 7 points behind City. So suddenly it wasn't a 9-pointer, but it felt like that, do you know what I mean, given that game in hand. So it was massive win. And
there's a psychological significance as well. Just what it does to them, how it could be a real reset in their season in that regard. Just everything about it. Because one of the things that had looked like was an issue with Liverpool was just almost this, they didn't have the conviction or the application that you would usually associate with a Klopp side. Now that comes from all sorts of things, right down to a change in tactics, but it also comes from kind of basic human doubt when things aren't going your well. And a win like that after what they did midweek to Rangers, that's kind of an important thing in itself. I think just it's two very different types of win in such a short space of time. Now, going into this game, you could argue there's maybe just a slight danger. This is almost one of those situations where Liverpool could have done with almost a week to let this game breathe, or at least kind of a forgiving Champions League fixture midweek, rather than straight into what is quite an awkward game at Anfield. But then the other side of that is they might be going into this thinking, well, we're ready to play all the time now, just because of what it's done to them as a team. And while I would have some caveats, because I think West Ham could be difficult to break down, and could make this difficult for Liverpool, just you feel now there's a bit of momentum in Liverpool that they'll take this on. And I've gone for Liverpool and under 4.5.
Yeah, interesting play there, 1.97. I know Mark agrees. Just a bit on West Ham, Mark. Where are you at with them this season? 8.0 seems big-ish price at Anfield, given that they're probably improving as they go on without having this unbelievable performance where you go, yeah, that's David Moyes' new West Ham this season.
Yeah, they are making sort of gradual improvements from where they started the season. I think it was only expected, really, considering the signings that they made. Have fleshed out the squad with quality, really. Obviously competing on all fronts as well, with European competition disrupting their own sort of recovery and preparation as well. In terms of the price, 8.0 I think is fair enough on West Ham, really. Liverpool haven't lost in front of fans at Anfield for over 5 years in the Premier League, so I'd be surprised if that run ended this week. I guess the issue from a Liverpool perspective is kind of piggybacking onto what Miguel was saying, is just, can they reach the same levels of intensity after Sunday again? It's been quite a grueling schedule. does Klopp look to freshen things up? He's got options on the bench, Henderson, Darwin, Fabio Carvalho, Trent, Curtis Jones, Shimikas. So, but you'd prefer Liverpool to be kind of picking the same team and sort of reaching anywhere close to those standards this midweek. But West Ham will be tricky. They have improved, unbeaten in 5 now across all competitions. Moyes was very frustrated at the weekend. They didn't get the points at Southampton. They had their season highest tally of shots in the Premier League, 25 at St Mary's, but only 3 were on target from 15 attempts from Scamacca and Paqueta. So they still are searching for the right blend, the right creativity, the right conversion, killer touch really in the final third. Just 3 away goals all season in the Premier League, despite 4 of those 5 away days they've placed being against bottom 6 opposition so far. And actually their record against the top half this season is 1 point from 4. They've scored just twice. And if you look at their away record last season, they lost 8 of 9 trips to the top half. They lost all 6 trips to the big 6. And incidentally as well, all 9 trips to the top half featured under 4.5 goals. Surprised to learn as well, they only kept 5 clean sheets on their travels since the start of last season in the Premier League. I think Liverpool, you'd always back them to score at Anfield, obviously. So if they do, and if they can reach anywhere close to those standards that they set in the last week, then I expect them to score a couple of goals and should be able to keep West Ham team out, who I still think are probably searching for the right blend in those forward positions of Bowen, Antonio and Benrahma. They've got options to mix and match, but at the moment I think they need a bit more consistency in front of goal.
Yeah, so we're going to lock that in. That's some interesting stats there regarding West Ham against the top side. So I think we'll lock in Liverpool and under 4.5 at around the even money mark, 1.97 currently on Matchbook as an official bet here. So we'll move on to the third game we're covering, and it's the Thursday night game, midweek here. There's going to be a couple of them we're going to cover. It's Fulham at home to Aston Villa. Fulham are currently 3.05, Aston Villa 2.54. The draw available at 5-2 or 3.5 on Matchbook. Both teams score yes is 1.76. No's available at 2.16, and the handicap, it's drawn a bet with Villa at 1.8 and Fulham 2.16. So Villa slightly favourites in the drawn a bet market, and the total is slightly shaded towards the over at 1.95. So Miguel, we'll go back to you on Fulham versus Aston Villa. I think it was massive for them to have Mitrovic back this weekend, although watching the highlights, it didn't seem he was fit enough to really start, albeit he got the goal from a penalty. Where are you at with Fulham at the moment? Because look, they've been a breath of fresh air themselves, and Bournemouth I kind of put in the same category, given that they were probably whipping boys the last time they were in the Premier League. Yeah,
that's it. I mean, there's an element of chaos about them, but it's mostly, as you say, given what they've had recently in the Premier League when they've been up, it's a positive chaos. They're currently 11th, 4 points ahead of relegation zone, so relatively safe for the moment, or at least relatively comfortable for the moment. Things aren't kind of getting pressurized in that regard. And their games have been quite enjoyable. So they're close to an average of, just in terms of kind of goals for and against rather than the actual score lines, but almost 2-2 for every game. And this thing, anytime I kind of go into a Fulham game, I'm almost thinking along exactly along those lines, with a kind of a tone set by the opening match of the season, that 2-2 draw against Liverpool. And it's hard not to think that this will be similar. I think this game is more framed because of where Fulham are. They've got Mitrovic coming back, as you say. They've had him back. And things are kind of just looking, if this isn't a bit of a contradiction, looking relatively stable for a team involved in so much chaos. The game is more framed, I think, by what Villa will do, especially given the pressure that Gerrard is under. They were actually, I thought Villa were actually okay against Chelsea. It was one of their better performances in overall play, but they've got clear issues in front of goal. With, again, maybe that come back to what we've already talked about in the pod today. I think just a general confidence situation. And also they had at least one defensive mishap with that header from Tyrone Mings to set up Mason Mount. So, I from that perspective, the one thing you can absolutely guarantee in this game, I think, will be goals. And Fulham, even though Villa have had those issues in front of goal, I think Fulham are just that bit porous to rule out the possibility that they're capable of. Basically, I don't think I'd ever back Fulham to keep a clean sheet at this point, more relevantly. Which is why, even though I'm tempted by a Fulham win, I think maybe it's far safer, because the odds suggest this, to go for both teams to score. But all of that is going to be heightened, of course, because this is one of those games where if Gerrard doesn't start picking up points here, where does he start picking up points?
Yeah, 1.76 currently, and incidentally, Miguel got the both teams to score up with Fulham Bournemouth as his best bet there at the weekend. So well done there, Miguel. And there's another both teams to score, yes. And Mark, it's been broad agreement today in the podcast by and large. You're in agreement with the both teams to score angle. And would you take some of Miguel's points? And Gerard, it is interesting that they're probably their two best performances have come at home to City and Chelsea.
Yeah, I think despite the criticism of him, including by myself before that game against Chelsea, I thought Villa played really well for the most part, and it's just poor errors, some terrific goalkeeping, poor finishing, which has cost them really. And as you say, they've thrived really as underdogs against Man City, and you could say as well away at Arsenal, they lost the game. They played pretty well. But now these are the kind of games where Villa have to earn their corner, and Gerrard in particular, because they're already 4 points below market expectations after the first 10 games, looking at the schedule. But yeah, it was much more watchable against Chelsea at least, and I think they have to take that sort of positive attitude and performance level into this kind of match, which is what Gerrard was saying he's demanding from his team. But he's been saying that all season, and we've seen very little to suggest that he's capable of sort of engineering that kind of from this Villa squad. Would disagree with Villa being favourites here at 265. I've talked about it for probably a year now. They just seem to be overrated by the market consistently. Not really sure what it is, to be honest. I know their underlying numbers aren't as bad as the league table suggests, but Fulham have proven already this season at Craven Cottage that they're a force to be reckoned with. Despite the red card, or take out the red card against Newcastle early on, they've been very, very competitive at home. But they do give you an opportunity, as Miguel says, not the kind of team you want to back to keep clean sheets. And I think Bournemouth cut them open a few times in counter-attacks. And if you look at the Villa side, there's plenty of pace in it, particularly in forward areas. So they should be looking to take a positive approach here, because there will be opportunities for them. But can you back them at the prices? I personally can't. They've won once in 8, they won twice in 14 going further back. Only Wolves have scored fewer goals. They've registered a very low XG and shot tally so far this season as well. So instead, rather than sort of backing either team, I just think you take the goals route, which I think is absolutely fair enough. BTTS at 1.76. Still have massive doubts about Villa as a defensive force, and as Miguel says, chaos seems to reign in Fulham matches. 9 of 10 have seen over 2.5 goals. 9 of 10 have seen both teams scoring as well. The only sort of game that didn't sort of fit either trend was the 0-0 draw at Wolves back in August, and we know all about Wolves and how their sort of style of play impacts matches. So yeah, happy to go BTTS again at a nice price.
That just says it all really about Wolves, doesn't it? The both lads are kind of leaning towards Fulham in the match odds, but we're going to lock in both teams to score, yes. So there's an official bet there, 1.76 currently. So the second Thursday night game we have, so the football all week this week, Leicester City at home to Leeds United. This is a very interesting game given the weekend's performances. Leicester currently 2.28, Leeds are 3.35. The draw is available at 3.65. Both teams to score is yes is 1.67 and no is 2.36. The handicap gives Leeds a quarter of a goal head start at 1.99, and the total is 2 3/4 goals, and that's slightly shaded towards the under at currently 1.95. So, Mark, we'll stick with you on this one. I think Miguel touched on it. Leeds versus Arsenal. I thought Leeds were by far the better team, particularly in the second half, and I think overall probably shaded the game. Which was surprised me, because going into the game, I didn't really have Leeds to be able to compete with Arsenal at that level. So where are you currently with Jesse Marsh's side? I know Adrian gave him a bit of criticism last week.
Yeah, I think warranted criticism as well, because I'm finding Leeds quite hard to place. I'd be more negative than positive about them over the last couple of months, really. They just seem to be finding all sorts of ways to drop points, whether it's sort of defensive lapses, poor decision-making in the final third, ill discipline, penalty misses. They've all contributed, really. They're now back in the bottom 6, really. And the win against Chelsea at Ellen Road feels a long, long time ago now. And that was a much improved effort against Arsenal, when I wasn't particularly expecting. But again, they've been their own worst enemies as well. It's now just 2 points they've earned in the Premier League since beating Chelsea. They're going away from home now, where they've lost 3 on the spin at Brighton, Brentford and Palace. All matches you'd expect Leeds to be pretty competitive in. And look, the first half against Palace was very, very positive, but again, they didn't get what they probably felt they deserved to, and they ended up losing that match. And Jesse Marsh has been talking about his side's inability of taking their chances and capitalising on their key moments, which has cost them in the last couple of weeks. So that's been a theme. But can they score against Leicester at the King Power? Then I absolutely think they can do that. I wouldn't be backing Leicester to be keeping a clean sheet, despite what we saw at the weekend. Yeah, and this match just smells like goals to me, despite Saturday's early kickoff curse, which bit me quite hard, as you pre-warned me.
I tried, Miguel. I tried.
Yeah, I mean, Overs has landed in 8 of Leicester's 10 games still, BTDS in 7 of 10 games as well. And I thought they started really well against Palace. I thought they fashioned some really good moments. The final ball was just lacking, but I thought Harvey Barnes was really lively. Patson Daka too. Madison probably not as influential as he has been. He's now suspended as well for this game. So Leicester do lose his set piece quality and his playmaking abilities. But I think, both teams are lacking confidence right now. Both teams have issues defensively, I think, which they need to resolve. But I think both teams have ability in the final third. I think Leeds just having Patrick Bamford fit and available despite missing a penalty is massive for them. So, for Brendan Rodgers as well, this is, I guess, for both teams, actually, it's all about the results now. It's almost irrelevant how they play. They just need results because Leicester play Leeds this midweek, then they play Wolves after. You have to presume both are must-win matches if he's going to keep his position. So again, I expect Leicester to play on the front foot, and perhaps the sort of chaos of Leeds will bring the best out of Leicester. It's hard to tell really, but I just don't fancy either team to keep clean sheets in this match. And I think there's enough going forward on both teams to suggest there could be goals in this game. So Leeds away from home since the start of last season, 70% of matches have featured 3 or more goals. So even without Madison and the Leicester team, I expect there to be goals in this match as well. And quite happy to sort of rinse and repeat, over 2.5 goals, 1.78. Had someone sort of having a bit of a go on Saturday after the defeat, after the bet went down of overs. But what I'd say is I'd back that bet again and again, week after week at that price, because I think invariably I'll be on the right side of things. So yeah, happy to go in again, even if it might sound bonkers after a 0-0.
No, recency bias, definitely worth sticking to your guns there, Mark. And I think, look, this game is taking place at, I think it's 7:30. So there'll be no early kickoff curse here this time. Miguel, you're also in agreement regarding the overs. But look, I think in line with the way yourself and Mark present cases, you're going a little bit more aggressively on this one. I think is the best way to play it.
Yeah. Even as Mark's saying there, where some of their away games have featured 3 or more goals. And another side of that is because it's not just about Leeds conceding, which I mean, my instinct would be for kind of a high-scoring, seesawing game, or at least would have been up until 2 weeks ago. Whereas there's just some slight suggestions that Rodgers has maybe turned a bit of a corner with Leicester. Last two performances have been good. The numbers have looked good as well, particularly at the weekend. And I think this could actually be a game where, okay, maybe I wouldn't have complete faith in Leicester's defence yet, which is why they might concede. But it could be one of those where they actually kind of just throw on a little bit of rhythm. They take Leeds apart. I was almost going to nearly thinking it'd be a 3-1 game to Leicester or something like that. But I just think there's sufficient capacity for, a fair few goals. Totally in agreement with Mark, but I suppose more in line, I'm maybe gone a little bit more aggressively with this one. And so many Leeds games under Marsh. Almost, it's remarkable to say, but almost to a greater degree than under Bielsa, because I think there was a more for all that Bielsa's football actually was all about creating a chaos itself. There was an order to what he did. More of an order. Where with Marsh's Leeds, it often seems like they can be much more erratic from game to game. It's often hard to know what you're going to get from them, whether it's going to be kind of a really convincing performance where they take games in their terms, or one where they just look all over the place. And then they were better against Arsenal, it must be said, but lost. So there's a potential effect of that. It just all feeds into what I think is going to be an open game, a lot of goals.
18.5, Leicester 3-1, Miguel. So maybe another small bet your side of things on the correct score. If anyone wants to do those couple of correct score bets on Matchbook, and incidentally, those margins do get a lot tighter, particularly an hour or two before kickoff on Matchbook. We won't lock it in a bet there, as it's one of the guys' official bets, and I'll say no more about it. We'll go on to a game that Mark did want to cover, so pay attention. And it's basically more of a price thing here regarding Southampton being a little bit too short at Bournemouth.
Yeah, I have no interest in backing Southampton at the minute, particularly away from home. Finding them hard to get them right, actually, this season, it should be said. But I think there's obviously been ongoing speculation surrounding Hasenhüttl's position. The performance on Saturday, when they've been well rested compared to a West Ham team playing in Europe, was worrying. They also lost their centre-half, Bella Kotchap, to a dislocated shoulder, I think it was. So he'll be missing. He's probably been their most consistent performer so far this season. Defensively, they're missing there for a key man. I know Chaleta Sarr is a decent replacement to come off the bench, but even still, it's a team that's not functioning quite right going forward at the minute. And Shea Adams always offers plenty of industry and work rate, but he's not a consistent goal scorer. Outside of that, they've been a little bit reliant on sort of individual moments of brilliance and set pieces. They've won just twice all season. They've lost 5 of 7 of late as well. They're favourites to win at Bournemouth, despite winning just 4 times away in the Premier League since the start of last season, keeping 2 clean sheets in that sample as well. So Saints don't tend to do the business away from St Mary's. And Bournemouth, a few weeks back, I suggested they were the worst team in the league by a long way and in a false position. I'm not sure. I've not validated this stat at all, but if it's true, it's remarkable. But since they lost 9-0 to Liverpool, Bournemouth are the only unbeaten team in the Premier League, which is astonishing if it's true. Remarkable, really. And things are starting to turn in their favour. Gary O'Neill clearly is doing a great job in terms of uniting the squad after Scott Parker was kind of writing his own players off. There's more bite about them. There's more hunger and there's more intensity. There's more attacking nous as well, I think. And I think they're playing with a point to prove, really, not just to Parker, really, but also us who have kind of been writing them off, really. And I think if you exclude the top 2, the Liverpool loss is Bournemouth's only defeat in 8 Premier League games this season. If you look at the underlying metrics over the last 4 games, they're ranking mid-table in expected points, which goes to show they're not quite as just being out of the depth really as they probably were at the start of the season. So they're underdogs here at home in a match which can be considered a derby in some circles. So quite happy to sort of oppose Southampton at those prices. I just don't see why they deserve to be favourites right now. I think it would be much more acceptable to have a bit of an each of 2 here, 275 Bournemouth and Southampton. It's not a strong position for mine, more of a lean, but I'd be happy to sort of back Bournemouth, draw no bet around even money.
Yeah, I was just going to ask regarding that. So yeah, Bournemouth drawn a bet 2.02 is Mark O'Hare's pick there in that game. So we'll move on to best bets time, but just have a quick recap of what we have so far. So United Spurs draw is available at 3.6. We're going with that bet. Liverpool versus West Ham. Liverpool and under 4.5 goals in the match, 1.97. And Leeds versus Leicester, both teams to score 1.76. Mark's also locked in Bournemouth drawn up at 2.02. Insights.matchbook.com, where you can find a full recap of all those bets on Monday afternoon. So Miguel, we'll go to you for best time. I drummed it up a bit with Fulham versus Bournemouth. I couldn't quite get with you there on Saturday. I left the game alone and I just saw the goals rain in. So fair play. Yeah. You're going for more goals this time. Brighton Forest. Again, I probably need more convincing here. So take it away this time.
Yeah. I mean, there's a few games this weekend or this week, midweek, I should say, that actually it feels like they could fit into particular patterns, which I think is always good in regards of, I think, the potential number of goals in a game. But with this, I mean, again, it's one of those where the two sides or the two teams almost come together to kind of condition it. First of all, there's how Brighton play. So every Brighton game under De Zerbi now, I think, is going to be enjoyable to watch, open, plenty of chances. And that is from both, because on one side, they, of course, are willing to go for teams. And the other side, they're willing to go for teams from a perspective where they invite sides onto them and then use that as an opportunity to play through them. There's a real element of risk to it, but as De Zerbi's career proves, it's been productive. I mean, and just with Forest as well, there's the ongoing openness of the games. But as well as that, maybe with that, there's just been a slight shift in Forest's season, I suppose, with the fact that they've now given Cooper a new contract. It almost just kind of provides a little bit of certainty where there have been so much doubt. And given that this is the sort of game where they would at least think that they can, and because of how Brighton play, I'd say Cooper can be more confident in his usual approach. And I think there's a goal to be got there. I just think, it completely falls into maybe a potential a 2-1, a 3-1, a 1-1. And it'd be even at 2.14. I think that's quite generous, I must say, for both teams to score. But it was one of a few that stood out for me this weekend or for this week. But just something it just speaks to me because of the way both teams play.
Interesting play there, Mark. We'll go back to you for Leicester versus Leeds. Is there any beware the midweek kickoff here before we lock it in as a best bet?
I hope not. No, as I say, it's just a rinse and repeat job for me with Leicester. I'm more than happy to keep backing overs if you're getting anywhere close to 1.8 in Leicester matches. They just tend to be goals in their games. If you look at the Premier League season so far, 8 of their first 10 matches have featured at least 3 goals. 7 of 10 have seen both teams scoring. I think if Leicester do score from some of those opportunities they fashioned on Saturday, suddenly you see a completely different game against Palace. But I think there were promising moments for Harvey Barnes and Patson Daka in particular. They've got quality to come off the bench as well. And ultimately, they're playing a Leeds team who are, similarly to Leicester, lacking complete confidence, whether it's defensively or going forward, but have to see this match as a hugely winnable opportunity. Both teams in poor form, both teams down there in the bottom 6 need a win. So I always feel that kind of breeds itself into a more sort of front foot approach from both teams. And I do think the sort of chaos of Leeds can bring out the best of Leicester too. So yeah, Leicester, I think, are deserved favourites to win this game. I do expect their season to turn at some point, but I think the beauty of backing overs in Leicester games is you could quite conceivably see Leicester win this game 3-0 and get paid out. You could see a 2-2. You could even see Leeds winning this match too. It's that sort of unpredictable in terms of trying to sort of nail down both of these two teams. But 70% of Leeds away games since the start of last season have featured over 2.5 goals. We're getting 1.78 on a repeat, and I think that's a bit too big to turn down. So yeah, it'd be my best bet.
Good stuff, lads. A great little show there. With my thanks to Miguel, my thanks to Mark. The guys will be back on Thursday. If you missed any of the bets, as I mentioned before, Matchbook Insights. And if you are listening on YouTube, do hit that thumbs up and leave a comment on who you're backing this week. As I mentioned, we'll be back Thursday. It's a great week of Premier League action, particularly the United Tottenham headlining that. We'll chat to you on Thursday. Have a great week.